Hey, Segovia, back with another one. We got a good one coming up today, y'all. We're taking a deep dive into these giant theories that Kandahar, Afghanistan giant that some special forces ran into. We got some Book of Nephilim. We got some giant tree stumps coming up today, and plus a lot more. And we're going to dive into some TikToks too. Over here, we do a mixture of long form video and TikTok. So, hope you guys are enjoying the content. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
In 2002, an Army infantry unit just vanished. They were on patrol in the Kandahar mountain range in Afghanistan, and they stopped using the radios. They stopped calling in. No one knew what was going on. They didn't call in a TIC, which stands for Troops in Contact. Basically, any military unit, if you're out on an operation and you start getting shot at, you radio in to your higher command, hey, troops in contact, or TIC, which signals to them you need to get aircraft on standby, you need to get ready to send reinforcements, they need to be ready to support you. But they only do that if you signal that you're in a TIC. And it's, a lot of people, if anything, will call it in too early. You know, units are known to call it in almost prematurely sometimes. And so the idea that a unit would vanish without calling in a TIC or any sort of communication about any gunfight or any ambush or anything, it's a little bit strange. And so they disappear. The Army decides that in order to find them, because this is obviously a really big deal, they would get their most elite unit, so the Army Green Berets, that's their very elite special forces, they would send them out to find this missing unit. And so one soldier that was a part of that elite special forces detachment, who just goes by Mr. K, he would come forward years later and tell the story of what happened once they were tasked with this mission. So they leave via helicopters and they fly out to the Kandahar mountain range, about 4 clicks, so 4 kilometers about, from where they believed was this infantry unit's last known location. And so they land and they start doing this fairly methodical search through the mountainside. They knew that they were in enemy territory, and at any time they could get into a gunfight, they could be ambushed. There's all these cave systems all over these mountains. And so it's slow moving to begin with. Plus, they're looking for this lost infantry unit. So it's just a very slow movement through the mountains. And so over the first few days, nothing really happened. They didn't come in contact with the enemy. They didn't see any sign of this missing infantry unit. They just walked along the mountains carrying a bunch of gear, and that was it. At some point, they noticed a little bit farther ahead that there was this distinct pathway leading up the mountain and kind of around the corner. And it looked like a goat trail. There were lots of goats that would run around the mountainside, and it looked like a very well-developed goat trail. And they decided, let's just go up there. If nothing else, we can go up onto wherever this leads us and maybe look down across the other side of the mountain and see if we can see anything. And so the team starts making their way up this goat trail. And as soon as they start making their way up, they start noticing that there are little pieces of American military equipment on the ground. There are pieces of radios, like whip antennas and housing of the actual radio itself. They found military-style backpacks as well, and they started finding pieces of uniforms that belonged to the missing infantry unit. They knew based on the patches that were on these uniforms.
So, I'm anxious to see, did they ever find that missing unit? If you guys know, I don't know if he says if they do or not. We're going to have to find out, but it's getting hot. You know what I mean? Like, you're hot, you're cold. It's probably getting hot. That tension's rising on that mountain, I bet.
So as they're walking up this trail of broken equipment and uniforms, they start seeing some bone on the ground. They didn't know if it was human bone or what. They start seeing broken bones scattered on their way up to this kind of plateau. And so now the Special Forces team, I mean, they're incredibly well trained. I mean, I'm not just being biased here. I mean, the Army Green Berets, the Army Special Forces, they're very similar to the Navy SEAL teams, which I was a part of.
But
Two different units, no doubt, but very much peers. And the level of training you get in handling situations like this one, now granted this one's pretty unique, you're so well trained that when things start getting dangerous, it's like your training just kicks in, and everybody's does. And so I would imagine that when they saw this, what they were thinking is, this was an ambush. This infantry unit was ambushed, and we're probably coming up on the ambush site. And so they're, taking defensive positions, and they're moving slowly and very tactically up this mountain, and they're keeping their weapons pointed at the leading edge on their way up to the top of this mountain. They get to this plateau. It's like a flat section of the mountain, right? It's like a steep mountain, and there's like this little shelf almost. and there's more equipment scattered and more bones scattered across it, and there's all these cave entrances right in front of them. It's as if they were intentionally placed so that they fed out onto this shelf. And so they start moving towards the mouth of the caves, and they realize, without even getting very close, that even though the mouth of these caves are pretty large and everybody could go into the cave, there is a steep drop off. Like, you'd walk in and then it just goes straight down, and someone kind of peered over the edge and couldn't see how far it went down, and they decided that it was just too dangerous to go in there, because clearly something happened here where American lives were lost, you know, based on the tattered uniforms and equipment. And so let's just pull back and take up defensive positions looking at the entrance to all of these cave entrances. And so as leadership goes down kind of out of the fatal funnels, if you will, outside of these caves, Mr. K, who's the guy who's told us this whole story, he said he's looking at one of the entrances to the caves and he sees a flash of movement inside of the cave. And he like looks over at it. He doesn't have time to react to it or anything. And all of a sudden a spear comes flying out of the cave, this big, like massive lance comes flying out, and it goes right through one of his teammates whose name was Dan. And so Dan's down. And so the whole team saw that. They didn't see who threw it, but they certainly saw the spear hit Dan. And so as they're like shocked and just keeping their weapon up, wondering what's going to happen, out runs this, by Mr. K's account, a 12 to 15 foot tall man with a red beard and red hair down past his shoulders, comes charging out, howling like a war cry. He's got animal skins for clothes. He just looks super dirty. And he runs over to Dan to pull the spear out and probably use it again. And the rest of the team at this point is broken out of their shock of what they're seeing, and they start engaging this giant. And the giant didn't really have a chance to fight back.
I mean, we got some clips coming up. You know, like I said, we do TikToks over here too. So be tuned. I mean, coming up, we got some clips of some Afghan taller type people, y'all. And they're everywhere. I mean, look at the NBA, like Shaq's. There's the Wemby, 7 feet. Like, they're out there, y'all. They're out there. And these are the people that are in the limelight. So imagine the people that are not in the limelight. You know what I mean? Like, they're out there. And in Afghanistan, like, from what we know, it's a poor country. They live like that giant might just be living off the land out there. You know, it might be allowed to. Out here in our national parks, you can't live off the land, but out there, it's a different world.
And in 30 seconds, the giant is down too. So Dan's down and the giant is down. And the whole team is like, what just happened? So after the dust had settled and all the shooting had stopped, they went to check on Dan, and Dan had passed away. And so they called back into higher headquarters, and they're trying to describe what happened. A very large, possibly human creature threw a projectile that hit Dan. And so they sent 2 helicopters out, one to retrieve Dan and the team, the other just to hoist up this very large human-like creature because they wanted to know what it was. And they struggled mightily to get the netting around this big creature. It ended up weighing over 1,100 pounds. It had 6 toes on each foot, and it had 6 fingers on each hand. They load it up, they string it onto this helo, and it takes off. And the team gets into the other helicopter, and they go back expecting to be debriefed as soon as they get back to base. The helicopter with the giant would fly to an airfield, and they would meet up with a crew of a C-130, which is another big military aircraft. The pilot of that craft would publicly say that he remembers seeing a 12 to 15 foot tall giant person with 6 fingers on each hand, six toes on each foot. And he would say that's what he saw, even though it was later redacted and made top secret. Mr. K and his team, they flew back to the base to be debriefed. And so they had to provide an after action report. It's something done in the military. You go out, you do any operation, you come back, and you write up what happened. And so Mr. K and his team decided to just be honest about what they saw. And so they described it again in detail. 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. It came out, it threw the spear, it hit Dan. It's this horrible situation. And once they submitted it, their leadership said, you got to rewrite that. Like, we're not going to accept that. So Mr. K said they ultimately rewrote it, and it just sounded like a typical engagement in the mountains with the enemy. And it was made top secret, and then they never saw it again. And that was it. Mr. K said that he and the rest of his team also had to sign non-disclosure agreements to not ever talk about what they saw. And they never got any word about what actually happened. Like, what did they do with the body of the giant? And They just never got any clarity out of it. It was just basically made top secret, redacted, and they were told don't talk about it. So it would take until 2016 when Mr. K finally just said, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go public with what I saw because my friend died and they're acting like, this didn't happen, but it did happen. And so that's why we have this detailed report of this mission where they came in contact with the Giant of Kandahar. I don't know how I feel about this story. I do think that if there was a place in the world that had the ability to mask or hide giants from being seen by the prying eyes of the human population, it would be Afghanistan. There were times when I was walking around out there that it felt like I was walking around on another planet. But either way, you do have one soldier who was killed by something out in the mountains of Kandahar, and his own teammates say this is what happened. And you have multiple corroborating witness testimony, but a lot of it's been made top secret and redacted, and so we don't really know what happened, or at least us commoners don't know what really happened. So I'd love to hear what you think happened, whether you think this totally happened. And
so much shady things happened with the war on terror, from why it started to how it ended, to things like this, to a special forces guy coming out and saying we were on bin Laden's ass in Tora Bora. We would have had that war over with in 10 days. But for some reason, the powers that be made a phone call and they said, pause everything. They saw military helicopters come in, military helicopters go out. Okay, you guys can proceed. Did they take bin Laden out? I don't know. Down to where they didn't even show the American people, the soldiers that lost their lives over there, coming home in those C-130s in their caskets. They didn't allow that to be filmed. First time in a war that's ever been done. Because I believe if the American people would have seen that come, like we were so out of touch that we were even at war. We just went on about our lives and didn't even think twice that we were at war. And that was by design by them. They didn't want us to see that. If we would have seen those caskets coming and coming and coming every day being unloaded, we probably would have put our foot down and been like, we want this war to end. And maybe the 1970s movement would have happened again. But we got some TikTok clips coming up, y'all. Like I said before, we're doing a mixture of long form with TikToks, y'all. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I'm not going to get away from the TikToks, but we're just trying this out right now. So let's get into some TikToks on this Kandahar giant.
The hair of this being was red. The skin was pale, white. He said it had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. And the feet were wrapped in a very primitive canvas type wrapping. And he said he and the guys that were standing around the body were actually taking their boots and putting it up to the foot. And he said it was, twice as big as 3 times bigger than everybody's boot. I mean, the feet were enormous. They're all putting their feet up to the foot. And he said this thing was solid as a rock. They were all kind of tapping it on the top. And he said it was like a brick. I mean, this thing was just like solid muscle. He said it could have been some rigor mortis or whatever, but I mean, it was apparent from what you could see of this dude that he was a brick house. So
how tall?
So the pallet was 9 feet long, and he's in the fetal position. So they estimated his size at 10 to 12 feet tall.
Wow.
They weighed the giant. They weighed this being because they had to weigh it. The loadmaster had to weigh it before they put it on the C-130. He weighed. The whole thing weighed, I think they told me, and I could be wrong, but I think it was 1,500 pounds. And then when you subtract all the dunnage and the pallet and whatever else, I know that the final weight
1,000
was 1,100 pounds. The final weight was
like, it was only, I mean, not saying only, but it was like 10 to 12 feet, he said. So that's like, let's just say double me, right? I'm 5'10", so double, right? Let's just say 10 feet. Let's just call it 10 feet, 6 inches, right? Heavy, like pure, like muscle. Muscle weighs more than fat. So that thing, like rock solid. He said, probably like a gorilla, like a chimpanzee. They're hard as a rock. You know what I mean? So that's how is a 10 foot but weigh 1,100 pounds? Not going to tell you guys my weight, but that's crazy.
And he told me for sure. He said the weight was, this thing weighed 1,100 pounds. And so you can imagine, let's say it was 12 feet tall, 1,100 pounds. So, I mean, this thing weighs more than like a Kodiak bear. I mean, it's a massive, massive guy. And then, he was asking about the body, like, where'd you guys get this thing? And they told him that they had heard, they didn't know, they never first had knowledge. They heard that a group of guys got lost somewhere out in Afghanistan, that this group was out there. These military guys were out there doing something, recon or something like that. And they weren't reporting back in. So they sent out another group to look for them. Another team went out to look for that first team. And when that second team found them, they found them either at the mouth of a cave or in a cave. I can't remember where, but it was in the vicinity of a cave. And they were all dead. And this gigantic humanoid was eating on one of them.
When he was just hanging out with his buddies in the mountains. And he said when he was by himself one time, he saw something that was really, really strange, and it piqued his interest. So he asked his mother about it. And she told him that, there was something that lives in those caves, and he's smart to stay out of those caves. She basically told him, if you want to find out what that thing is, you're probably going to regret it. So I advise you stay out. And then after that, he connected two and two, and he's like, oh, okay, I guess, every time we go up near this cave and leave this animal, perhaps that's what we're doing, and that's indeed what they were doing. So
now, when you say leave the animal, and I know something here, and I'll let you tell your story, and then I'll tell you what I know.
Okay.
I think it's going to be interesting. When you say leave the animal, elaborate on that. What are you talking about?
Well, my family owned animals over there. They raised for food, and periodically they would go to a certain location, and my father would witness his mother lead an animal up to this area where there was a cave, like within a stone's throw away, very, very close to where they would tie this animal up. And that's pretty much what he told me he saw when he was very young. And then when he was older, and he had seen this big giant footprint after it rained one day. And then when he questioned his mother about it, that's when, he kind of made the connections that perhaps, that's why they were leaving animals there when he was much younger. And it's really wild stuff, but I can only go based on what my father told me, and he told me that he was a little bit freaked out when she told him that. So he dug a little more and asked her about it, and she pretty much said that it's a jinn. It's this, I don't know if you would call it a demon or just another being that lives in the earth. But apparently there's a bunch of these things, and there were people for generations going and leaving these, I guess you would call them offerings, peace offerings, or just like, like World War I, Neville the Appeaser, something like that.
Right.
I don't know if there was like this trust that had formed between certain bloodlines and families throughout, time, but that's
Don't panic.
It's so crazy that a movie came to my mind called The Ritual on Netflix, y'all. It was a Netflix movie, and there was hikers that went hiking, and they ended up getting lost, and these people that kind of live off the land out there captured them, and they gave them as a ritual to this giant being that's like made out of sticks and all that. It looks like a tree, and it comes out, and it ate them, but that was like them being like, here, don't hurt us. Here, we'll give you this if you don't hurt us. And they would just get random people out there.
And don't freak out. Or turn around and tell me what you see on that mountain up there. And he turned around, he's like, where? And I said, up on the top up there. And he goes, oh my God, it's a giant. And when he said that, this thing kind of went like this, and it turned around, and as it took like 3 strides, and it was over the face. And as it did, it changed back and forth from a tree to a person to a tree to a person as it was going off.
That's what I'm saying, y'all. They tell us in the movies.
Yeah, that thing can camouflage somehow. And we're like, wow. So then the people, they're looking at what we're looking at, and they don't see it now because it's gone. And they're like, what's going on? Que pasa? And I said, guys, does anybody here ever tell y'all that there's a giant in this region? And all the pastors went, yeah, there's one that lives on top of that mountain right up there.
Oh my gosh. Wow, you've got like 5 or 6 or more people confirming.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, we just saw it. He said, yeah, he's a devil. And they just went, yeah, to hell with that devil. And they just went right back to praying. I mean, it's just part of their life.
See, it's a common thing with these things, y'all. They're looked at as evil. A lot of monuments, like coming up later in the video, we got what is it, Devil's Stump or whatever it is, Devil's Tower. There's a bridge out in Sedona, a famous bridge where people take pictures on, famous hike out there called Devil's Bridge. Like these things that are giants, right, are all linked to devil, evil, So, and that's what they're telling us. Like these beings that we're seeing in the sky, these orbs and all these UFOs, they're saying they're demons, y'all. They're coming back.
And part of who they are. And yeah, so that was my giant story. And that's the only time I've ever seen it. And we've rescued more than 1,000 kids down there since then. And we continue to do the work down there. But it's hairy down there.
The giants, they said, lived in here right after they came into this region right after the volcano exploded a few thousand years later and settled in here. They were always very vicious. They attacked the Apaches. They attacked the Hohokam as well as the Pimas. These things were nothing to be messed with. According to the Pimas, they would rip the heads off their braves, lift their bodies up and drink their blood, and then toss their bodies when they were done. In some cases, they actually devoured the bodies and leaving nothing behind except for splatters of blood. These went on in here. Actually, the last giant that was killed in here was about 500 years ago. And that is when the Pimas, according to their oral history, is when they killed this giant. And there hasn't been any in there since that time. I think he was the last remaining giant.
Let's just see what was spotted at a conference in Dubai with Mr. Beast, famous YouTuber.
See, they're still
he calls
among
out
us, y'all.
2
They're
individuals from the crowd.
They're just civilized.
That literally must be descendants
they got
of
iPhones
giants.
now.
Like I'm talking, look at this.
They got TikTok.
of humans. Before I answer that, can you two stand up real quick? Those guys might be the tallest guys I've ever seen in my life. And I've just been staring at them this whole time. How tall are you guys? Wait, here, can you actually just come up real quick? Can you stand beside my CEO, Jeff, real quick? Just for a comparison. I don't know these guys. This isn't planned.
They're among us, y'all.
Walked in and it was. Are you an NBA player? Are you actually?
Look at that. See, you can't tell me that, let's just say 500 years ago, like this guy's 8 feet, maybe 7.5 feet, probably 8 feet. You can't tell me 500 years ago they weren't 10, 12, 15 feet. If they're walking among us now at 7, 8 feet, athletic, dunking, layups, shooting threes, right? Catching footballs. That's not too long ago, y'all.
Is this not crazy? I don't want to stand up because I'm going to look like short. What is it?
Okay, so listen. Those 2 guys were between 7 foot 11 inches and 8 foot 1, I think. So they would be like micro-sized on the giant scale throughout history. 6 foot is that, okay? We're talking, if you have looked at the ancient bones they found, which they've hidden, but there's still rumors and secrets that have emerged from, and you look at historical context of all ancient cultures talking about these freaking beings, those would have been like these small fry giants compared to what else we got. And you.
But now that I know, this totally look like big toes sticking out of the grass.
Start digging.
Yeah.
Start digging.
Honey, you're walking on the giant's big toes. You better make sure he doesn't start wiggling.
See, there's giants everywhere. It's not just in Afghanistan. It's here in America. It's in Arizona. It's in California. It's in Nevada. It's in Montana. It's everywhere, y'all. There's giants everywhere, and they just hide it. But now we're going to take a little biblical turn and see what's going on with that, y'all. Let's see what's going on with that. See, these are things that are just happening recently, y'all. Like the 50s and 60s, where there's people right now watching this that were born in the 50s and 60s. Like this wasn't thousands and thousands, millions of years ago these bones were found. This was just yesterday. And look how easy and fast it was for them to wipe our history away. Just from those years that there's people still living now, thriving, out exercising every day, grocery shopping, driving, doing things that young people are doing. And they wiped that history away like that. I don't know why, y'all. Like, can you imagine like how big America would grow? Maybe they don't want a certain gender, not a gender, a certain race of people to be like, what the heck? We're Egyptians here in Arizona, Grand Canyon? That we're them? Like, you know what I mean? Maybe they don't want that. I don't know, y'all. Cause I don't think people would really lose their mind if they came and said, you know, ancient Egyptians were in the Grand Canyon and founded it. I don't know. Maybe they don't want this Christopher Columbus to lose his mojo, even though he discovered America, but there was already people here, a civilization here. I don't know, y'all. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know down below. Why are they trying to suppress this so bad?
And to shut down any thinking about whether or not the things we're looking at could be supernatural in any way. They're all natural phenomena. That's what we know. But anything that suggests like supernatural is just ruthlessly put down.
I wouldn't see giants as supernatural. That's an animal. That's a creature. That's a mammal. That's
right.
So I don't know why that is so dangerous.
I don't either. I mean, but that's kind of the question. Like you see the truth in the reaction, I guess is what I'm saying. Like why do you care?
I mean, there's somewhat giants in the NBA and football. And, you know, just think about when there's something to giants, y'all, that catches the people's eyes. Like when you're out at a grocery store and there's someone that's like 6'8", 6'9", like everyone's energy goes like, you know what I mean? Like we just look at it for a brief second, like, and then go back about our day. You know what I mean? But it does like there's something in our DNA and our genetics and our soul that when we see something out of the normal, like a giant person walking by that has to duck to go under the door, like everyone's attention just goes and then we're back. You know what I mean? Like it's like seeing a bear in public. Like you're going to look like, what the heck? Like it's out of normal. But when you see somebody that's of our kind, of our flesh, right? Looks just like us, 5 fingers, 5 toes, but he's just taller, like our energy goes towards him. It's weird. See, it's starting to click for me, like, and I'm probably slow to you guys, but I just kind of caught on. Like the reason they're hiding all these things is because it's right there in the Bible. Like, what are they doing all over the world? They're killing, war, all over religion, right? They don't want that truth out. They don't want that truth. Once that truth comes out, they lose all power. And the truth's out there for us to find, and it's right there for free. But the society tries everything they can do to keep us from going that route, right? Let's create this. Let's create this. Let's say this is bad. Let's do this with Catholic priests and say that, you know, this will get this bunch of people to not follow. Let's get, you know what I mean? So much different things, so much different books, but they all kind of talk about the same thing. But the powers that be try to keep all the people divided and away from going that route. So that's why they're hiding these giants. That's why they're hiding these Grand Canyons. That's why they're hiding our past. That was my little theory coming up from watching these little clips right now. You could just figure it out, or am I a little late to the party? Let me know down below. That was just what came to my mind when I'm watching these. My first time watching these clips with you guys, and I just speak what comes to my mind to you guys. Well, we got giant tree stumps. We got pink Himalayan sea salt that's in probably all of our kitchen cabinets right now, right? We're getting on into all that, y'all. Like, let me know how you guys are liking these new videos, y'all. Let's get into some more clips.
The great deceit of our lifetimes is that the institutions that we think are preserving knowledge are actually hiding information. That's a big difference.
Yep.
And the two that probably are the most complicit in hiding truth from people are the Vatican and the Smithsonian Institute. But the Smithsonian Institute forever has run to the first mention of a giant and then created a cover story, whisk up any bones or any artifacts, and they do two things with them. They hide them in the Smithsonian Institute, or else they make it a national park to where nobody could ever dig there again. But like the Ohio mounds, the Indians, well, let me say it this way. The Smithsonian says these big mounds have lots of little Indians buried under them. You ask the Indians, they say, we don't bury people like that. These are burial places for the giants. And we all know that. And there's one giant body under each mound. And we have never, ever buried our dead like that. Again, it's a cover story, and, just baffle them with BS and tell them that it's an Indian burial ground, and any digging or snooping around is forbidden,
all right. I think Indians even say that these were here before we got here. He was told that there were 3 giants there. They killed 2 and 1 got away. I think so many people, when they hear the story of the Kandahar Giant, they're like, oh, it's a one-off.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked to a guy named Ray who was adopted out of his Afghanistan family, was raised American, reconnected with that side of the family as an adult, winds up meeting his grandmother in Afghanistan, or his uncle, I think it was. And his uncle tells him how when they were kids growing up, their mom, so Ray's grandmother, would take a goat out into the mountains and sacrifice it to the giants. She would feed the giants goats as almost like a peace offering.
Wow.
Years ago, I had a guy who listened to the show. I don't know if he still does, but he was in the military. He would go out in Afghanistan while he was there, just asking people different things about the area. And when he bring up giants, he said a lot of times people would either clam up or just act like they have no idea what he's talking about. And one guy told him that there was a very specific location in Afghanistan that shares the border with China, which is about a 30-mile stretch. It's a natural preserve. And he said there's giants up there. That's why nobody goes up there.
Wow.
So in the Middle East, there's this legend of giants that are walking the earth today.
Sure. I still believe that. Yes, absolutely.
And even here in the States, people talk about it. Utah is wild with legends.
Yes.
So my thought is, if the rise of the Nephilim is coming, like you were talking about the technology and all that, but I think the last point you made was actual giants.
Absolutely. 100%.
What are the Nephilim? And am I pronouncing it correctly?
I mean, good enough. Yeah. It's the I am at the end. The im is the plural in Hebrew.
Okay.
But yeah, so there's a little bit of debate about where exactly the word comes from, because it's not a regularly used Hebrew word in the Hebrew Bible, which isn't all that odd either. There are a lot of words that are only used once in the Hebrew Bible. But people have tried to do different things with it. Right? So there's a Hebrew verb nafal, which is the verb to fall. So some people have wanted to say, well, it's the fallen ones. But in Hebrew, Nephilim is reflexive, so it would be the ones who are fallen upon, right? Which is a little more difficult. But it seems pretty clear. Most people agree now, because there's an Aramaic word, Nephilim, ends with an N, that just means giant. And so it seems pretty contextually clear that this is just the Hebrew form of that word, and this is talking about giants. It's translated in the Greek Old Testament with giantes in Greek, which is where we get the English word giant. But a lot of people, when they hear the word giant now, think fee fi fo fum, right?
Yes.
That's not the core of the idea.
When I read or listened to parts of the book of Enoch, it talks about fallen angels coming down and teaching the people weaponry, technology, how to farm, how to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Then they slept with women and created Nephilim. And then in the book of Enoch, it said these were giant men and their appetite can never be sustained or whatever.
Fulfilled,
so they would start eating men. And so they're just like these evil giant creature men. But this Native American, not referencing scripture at all, talked about in America, these star people came down and they taught the natives how to make bow and arrows and how to cultivate,
so it's
farm,
the
and like do all this
same
stuff.
story.
And he says, and then these star people basically would sleep with the women of the tribe. These women would give birth to giants. And these giants had red, long hair. He said, but then they would eat the men of our village, or just the people. And so we had to drive them out and kill them and stuff. I'm like,
It's all lining up.
What?
It's all lining up.
Weird.
I'm scared.
I don't like that news.
Weird. I feel like we have to apologize for this episode.
I mean, so much history, y'all. So much history, so much stories that been passed down generation. Now we know the telephone game, how things change, but a lot of them from all over the world seem to have a lot of similarities, right? And they tell us in the movies, y'all. Like I told you that movie before we even saw that. Like that's what they're doing in that movie, and it was like a tree, it was like a stick, and it transformed and stuff, just like this guy was saying, y'all. They tell us in the movies, and that wipes the slate clean for them. But now coming up, it's not just giants, y'all. We got that giant trees, giant tree stumps that are mountains now, petrified giants, Himalayan sea salt. A lot of coming up, y'all. I mean, there's giants everywhere, y'all. Not just giants either. We got giant trees, giant petrified giants. You know what I mean? Mountains that look like certain shapes. On the way to Sedona, when you're going down the I-17 heading north, right? There's a giant mountain out there that looks like an Indian laying on his back. You see the nose, the eyes, the mouth, the chin. You see all that, y'all. So we're gonna get into some trees that were destroyed, y'all. That look like giant trees. They're mountains, and they got eerie names like Devil's Mountain and Devil's Bridge and all these evil type of names to it. Now, is that because maybe these giants were demons like they tell us? Or was that just some psychological warfare that the powers that be gave the name so that when time comes, when this gets exposed, they can say they're evil when they're really not? I don't know. Who knows, y'all? Who knows? But all I know is they are erasing history, and they're good at it, and they've been doing it since the beginning of time. And we'll get into some stories a little later and give you guys some examples of them destroying things as recently as last year, right? Let's get into it.
So I'm not here to argue whether giant trees did exist or didn't exist. I think most of you can make up your own minds about that. So for entertainment purposes and for the sake of this presentation, let's just pretend that they did exist. Let's consider the hypothesis and ask the question, okay, if these structures were giant trees, why do they look like they were cut down? Now, ordinarily, you wouldn't ask that question until you were able to prove that they were giant trees to begin with. But let's just say that they were, and see if what I'm about to present makes any sense. Now, take a moment to consider the magnitude of such trees. A single tree that dwarfs the tallest redwood today would have been so massive that a person could walk through its trunk like a cathedral. Entire civilizations might have lived under its canopy or even climbed its branches. These weren't ordinary trees. They were cosmic structures, living monuments that connected the earth to the sky. And yet, when you look at the landscapes today, the flat-topped mesas, or the enormous stumps, the petrified logs, it's clear something changed for a reason. The idea that these giant trees of the antediluvian world were intentionally cut down opens the door to a far stranger possibility, one that would connect these ancient forests to legends of beings so massive and powerful, they might have needed these trees as a means to survive. You see, what would be the reason to cut them down? Who or what stood to gain from their removal? This is where history, myth, and mystery begin to connect. And the story of the giant trees becomes far more than just a tale of the natural world. Perhaps a reminder that in the end, there is no escaping judgment. Look at certain landscapes, flat-top mesas, towering buttes, or column-like formations like Devil's Tower. It's easy to assume you're just seeing the work of erosion over millions of years. The idea is, over time, through a combination of mineralization and catastrophic events, the organic matter of these trees turned to stone, leaving behind stumps and columns that we now interpret as purely geological formations. Geologically speaking, a mesa is a type of landform that looks like a flat-topped hill or small plateau with steep, often cliff-like sides. The word mesa actually comes from Spanish meaning table, because they look like giant tables rising above the landscape. There are several types of mesas, and there are several elements to the geological explanation. But the main idea is that you have layers of rock, isolation, and erosion leaving behind the mesa. Now, the geological explanation for mesas make sense on paper, but when you really scrutinize it, a few flaws, or at least unanswered gaps, start to show up. First, many of them have this uniform flatness. Erosion is usually messy, uneven, and unpredictable. But many mesas and buttes around the world are strikingly flat, almost like they were sliced off with precision. If erosion were the only factor, you'd expect more jagged, inconsistent tops rather than broad, level tabletops. And you do have that in some instances. Second is the scale and distribution. Some of these formations are massive and isolated, rising straight up from the surrounding land. Geologists say these are the remains of larger plateaus, but the question remains, why do so many look almost identical across many different regions of the world?
They do look identical.
It seems oddly consistent for random erosion processes. Third, if these formations are millions of years old, erosion should have worn them down far more drastically, especially in harsh climates like deserts where wind and sand constantly blast the rock. Their persistence and symmetry over such long time scales raises questions about whether erosion alone is enough to explain them. So now when we look at the ancient tree theory, there's another layer to this when you start looking at myths and legends from cultures around the world. Many of these stories speak of a world tree, a cosmic entity that literally connected heaven, earth, and the underworld. In Norse mythology, Yggdrasil is described as a massive ash tree whose roots reach into the depths of the underworld, while its branches hold up the heavens. When we start talking about giant trees, it's hard not to think about the beings that might have lived alongside them. And that brings us to the Nephilim. Not only that, but we know there is evidence of giant animals and insects as well. Now, here's the thing. Imagine a world where the trees themselves were as massive as mountains. It's easy to see why some theorists suggest a connection. What if these enormous trees were something the Nephilim could interact with in a practical sense? They could climb them with ease, use them as vantage points, or even hollow them out to create living spaces. A tree of that size would provide shelter, storage, protection, almost like a natural ark rising above the floods, a sanctuary for beings of their size. The theory goes further. Some suggest that these giants may have used the trees strategically when the floodwaters came. Instead of seeking refuge in simple rafts or boats, they could have utilized the tallest, sturdiest trees as survival mechanisms, using their strength to modify the trunks and branches to suit their needs. So, what if the falling of these trees was a deliberate act to prevent the Nephilim from surviving the flood? The biblical narrative focuses on the destruction of humanity and the giants, but maybe divine intervention went even further. By removing the very structures that giants could have used as arks or safe havens, their chances of survival were erased completely. In this scenario, the trees weren't just trees, they were lifelines, and cutting them down was part of the plan. So, who would cut them down? The angels of heaven, maybe? In several ancient texts, there are references to giant trees that touch the sky. The best example is probably in the Epic of Gilgamesh in Tablet 5. As Gilgamesh and Enkidu face Humbaba in the cedar forest, the battle is more than what it seems. This is more like a cosmic battle. During the fight, Enkidu urges Gilgamesh to strike harder, warning that their actions are tied to a powerful, almost cataclysmic force. And I quote, "to send the flood to crack the whip." And that line suggests that the conflict in the forest is linked to divine or natural judgment. As they battle, the earth itself reacts. Mountains like Mount Hermon and Lebanon split, the clouds darken, and a rain of death falls like fog. These descriptions tie the act of confronting Humbaba to apocalyptic imagery, or the flood. In the text, it reads, "They cut through the cedar." While Gilgamesh cuts down the trees, Enkidu searches through the Urmazalu. Enkidu addressed Gilgamesh, saying, "My friend, we have cut down the towering cedar whose top scrapes the sky." The scale of the formations we see today are the remains of something extraordinary. They wouldn't just be trees, they were monuments to a lost world.
I mean, that looks like
Evidence
a
of an environment and a species that goes beyond our understanding. The thought that the giants might have used them to rise above the flood, literally and figuratively, adds a layer of tension to the landscape. Every stump, every mesa could be the remains of what was once a colossal forest. Not all trees, not even most trees, but a few of them cut down for reasons we can only speculate about, leaving us to wonder about the forces at play in that ancient world. And that brings us to the ultimate mystery. Were these trees destroyed purely by the passage of time, or was there intent behind their destruction? If they were, in fact, trees, could they have been deliberately cut down to prevent giants from reaching above the floodwaters, to erase knowledge, or to enforce a cosmic judgment? The evidence is buried in the earth, in the petrified stumps in the shape of the mesas, leaving us with questions that may never be fully answered. All that remains are these witnesses, monuments to a forgotten battle in a world that once was. And they once stood in the landscape as reminders of a history that is part natural, part divine, and still a mystery.
I mean, who knows? I mean, do they do things for the betterment of us? I mean, our civilization doesn't, but maybe prior civilizations did things for the betterment of the people. I don't know, y'all. But all I know is they've been destroying things. They destroyed, shot cannons and all that at the Sphinx in Egypt, burned libraries, even something that just recently, which I'm not saying is right or wrong. I mean, but they're taking down Cesar Chavez monuments. They're taking down, a bunch of stuff in the South and all that. Now, is it right or wrong? I don't know. But all I'm saying is history has always been taken down, has been destroyed, has been burned. It's just something we do. I don't know why, but it's something we do, y'all. Something we do.
This is one of my favorite examples of one of our massive ancient trees from our past. Shiprock Mountain in New Mexico. And what I really like about this one is you can still see the fallen top half of the tree, especially from this angle and on Google Earth. Here's an aerial shot of it. You can see that fallen top half of the tree going to the right. You can even see that root system. And it almost looks like, interesting enough, it almost exploded. When you look at the stump too, something blew this tree up. It's really hard to get that close in the air to Shiprock. They restrict the flying areas around a lot of these formations. I wonder why. But here's a real treat. Somebody was able to get access to fly real close to it and tell me it doesn't look more like a tree from this perspective. It really is breathtaking from this view. Google Earth and satellite view and street pictures just do not do it justice, like getting this close to it in the air does. Perhaps this tree, as it's not cut so perfectly straight like a lot of these other ancient trees are, perhaps it was hit with one of those massive plasma storms from one of the many other resets, because it definitely does look, even more so from this angle, like something struck the base of it and it blew up. Question everything, friends. Until next time.
I could just get you to see them mountains as tree stumps. If you can really see that, the veil is broken, bro. Because from that point, you see everything. You see everything. You really get to looking at the mountain, you be like, oh shit. That shit do like a tree that got cut down. And then you start scanning back, looking at the whole mountain range, you be like, oh fuck, that's the tree, they cut it right there. That's disguised as mountains. Boy, that shit stand out clear as day when you notice it's a tree you're looking at. And then think about how tall the tree was. You're like, oh shit, hold on now. I'm looking for evidence about all this shit Rashad Jamal be talking about how we fell in frequency and this was our planet and we was giants and we was blue, red, and green and we did blah, 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 blah. Look at this big ass tree.
Now, what do you think of mountains used to be trees, petrified trees? A lot of these mountains.
Well, yeah, that's something to think about because they did have a whole mountain that was literally looking like a cut off tree with the axe still sitting on it.
With the axe still sitting on it? I ain't seen that one.
Yeah. It's a petrified mountain with the giant axe.
I've never seen that one.
Because I know a lot of the mountains are smooth on the top, like as if a tree trunk got cut.
So you don't know where this is, huh?
I don't know exactly where the site is, but it's an actual site.
What if 9,000-foot trees once covered the earth, but something cut them down and their remains are the mountains we see today? It sounds impossible, but according to one theory, some of the world's most unusual mountains aren't mountains at all. They're ancient tree stumps. Supporters point to places like Devil's Tower, with its massive column-like formations and strangely flat top. From above, they argue it looks almost like the stump of an enormous tree, and similar formations can be found around the world. But here's where the theory gets even stranger. We already know that wood can become petrified, slowly turning to stone while preserving its original structure. So what if this happened on a scale we've never imagined? Ancient cultures around the world also told stories of enormous world trees, stretching from the earth into the heavens. Trees like Yggdrasil in Norse mythology. What if these stories weren't entirely mythology? What if Earth once looked completely different, covered by trees thousands of feet tall? And if these mountains really are their petrified remains, it leaves us with an even bigger question. What happened to the giant trees? And what could possibly have been powerful enough to cut them all down?
Family, we can just keep going on and on and on with different subjects, different videos, different TikToks. It's endless, y'all. It's endless. And a lot of this history is hidden for us. We kind of got into what my theory is on it. Make sure you guys leave your theory down below on why you think they're hiding all this from us. They tell us in the movies, they hide it from us, they bury it, they burn it, they do what they got to do so we, the people, don't find out the truth. And they're damn good at it, y'all. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you made it this far, leave a like, comment, subscribe, y'all. Hope you guys are enjoying this new form of content. Probably tomorrow we'll do a regular TikTok mashup. Take a little break from these, you know. But if you guys enjoy them, you know, just we can keep doing them because honestly, I enjoy it a lot more. It's more fun. I feel like I learn a lot more. So you know, I guess time will tell if you guys enjoy it. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people are gonna say it's your channel, do what you want. YouTube doesn't work like that, y'all. If it was up to me, we'd be out on the mountain, hiking, talking life, you know. But nobody would watch that. So it's not what I want to do. It's what the people want. So you guys need to really let me know what do you guys want. But I'm gonna get out of here, y'all. I'm gonna edit this video up. I hope you guys have a good one. This is Segovia. I'm signing out of the man cave. I'll see you guys tomorrow in the next one. Later.